Start by getting situated so that your eyes are completely closed. But every time you hear this bell, your body and your mind is reminded that you are starting to meditate. Begin by inhaling and exhaling through your nose. Really grounding your posture. And begin using your breath to settle the body in its most natural state. Begin by using every exhale to completely relax. Relax your eyes and the space in between your brows. Relax your face fully, your jaw, the corners of your mouth. Use every exhale to fully surrender. Relax your shoulders and the knot behind your neck, running down your shoulders and down your shoulder blades. Release any tension that your upper back tends to hold. Moving down your back and releasing any tension that your lower back also tends to hold. Moving down your hips, down your legs, to the base of your feet. So that your body is now fully and completely relaxed. Now let's move to speech and settling your speech. You're obviously not speaking, so where else is there chit chat? Most of us have a lot of noise in the space of our mind. So let's begin to relax our speech. With every exhale, release any unnecessary noise. Simply letting it go. Using your breath to release. Using your inhale to keep your mind bright and clear. Release doesn't mean laziness. Relaxation doesn't mean laziness. So keep your mind bright with the inhale and release with every exhale. And now we're going to move to the space of your mind. Begin by observing if there are any noises, objects, thoughts that you might have, visuals that occupy the space of your mind. And if so, begin by using your breath to completely release those thoughts. So that what you're ending up with is a completely relaxed, version of your body, speech, and your mind. Okay, you can open your eyes. Okay, great. Okay, that was just a pre-meditation. So in the past, what we've done is we'll do a short 7 to kind of 8 minute sit, and then we'll let everyone stretch, and then we'll go into a deeper meditation. How was that for everyone to start? Is that okay? It was nice, really good. Everyone felt solid in the room, really nice. I almost felt like I didn't want to disrupt you. Okay. All right, so we're going to do, we'll do 15 minutes, and we'll do the same meditation we did last week. Doing the 4 steps. Okay, here we go. Ready? Go ahead and resume. Using your breath to ground your body, your speech, and your mind. Take a few breaths, inhaling and exhaling through your nose. And begin to think about one thing that you feel would bring you happiness right now in your life. Make that really clear, whatever that is. What is the one thing that you need right now, or that you feel like you need right now, that would make you the most happy? Then I want you to consider for a couple of breaths, what are the outer circumstances and situations that you see that get in the way of your happiness? Things that are feeling like it's outside of you, outside situations. Don't doze off, make it really clear. Now consider, what are the inner situations, the inner blocks that get in the way of your happiness? Now I want you to consider, who is one person that you know in your world that shares the same desire as you do, has the same type of want, wish for happiness, and perhaps similar blocks, outer and inner. Bring that person in front of you, not as a photo, but actually bring them in front of you. What are they wearing? What colors are their eyes? What does their hair look like today? Are they wearing a fragrance? And I want you to visualize doing one thing for them that would make them happy, that would fulfill their happiness. How would you help them? Whatever it is that they want. Visualize doing that action. And start to visualize how that would really change for them. Do you see it in their face? Do you see how it transforms their life? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? How are they expressing it to you? Spend a few more breaths feeling what you've done for them. And then I want you to make eye contact with them, him or her. Thank them for giving you the opportunity to be able to help them. Also knowing that in helping them, you're also helping yourself. Rejoice in what you've been able to do for them. Celebrate together. And then dedicate your effort figure out what that feels like for you. What does dedicating your effort feel like? That's such an unusual thing for Westerners. We don't do it very often, so you wonder if you're doing it right or wrong. So I want you to take a few minutes in resolving what dedication can feel like for you. Who are you dedicating it to? And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. How was that? You're sleepy. What part did you get sleepy?
At the beginning of the first one, on and off about both of them.
Uh-huh. Okay. Uh-huh. Well, you're also probably jet lagged. Yeah. Anyone else?
I got agitated when, like, the first step was easy, but then it was like I couldn't think of a person. And then I thought of one, but I wasn't satisfied. And I'm like, is this the right answer? And then, every subsequent step, I was more like agitated because it was less clear.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. That's fair. Okay. Anyone else?
I think trying to feel dedication.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think if I had double the time, it might have at least felt something.
Uh-huh.
And maybe intensified.
Yeah.
Felt like I was still trying to find out.
Figure it out. Okay, that's great to know. That's great feedback. Yeah. The dedication thing is a bit tricky. And I think it's tricky because, like I said, we don't do it culturally. It's such a strange thing. And I remember when I started my practice as well, that's one thing I tripped up a lot because I hear it a lot. I hear a lot of, especially in this Sangha, we talk about rejoicing and dedication so much, right? I've mentioned before in previous classes how I've heard teachers of mine say that the main reason we're in the cycle of suffering, the reason why we suffer as humans so much is because we don't rejoice and dedicate. We're actually fantastic meditators. We just meditate on the wrong subjects. We usually meditate on everything that goes crappy in our life or all the, the bad things that are going on. We rarely really focus our time or have or focus meditations with wisdom or really thinking about the good things that we do. And most of us actually do a lot of great things every day. But if you don't think about it and dedicate it, you're almost just giving away. It's like giving away money, free money, where you can reinvest it back into something that can grow exponentially. So how do you practice dedication, and what does that look like? And I've had for myself, I've had a number of different people that will talk about it with me or exercise it in different ways. But I have found that it's something that's very personal to you because it's something that you feel in your heart. It's like talking about love. How do you teach someone what it's like to fall in love? I mean, you can't really. I mean, you can talk about the effects of it. And I will also say that over the years of practicing, I have different moments of what dedication really feels like. And they're not always in meditation either. I've been in yoga classes sometimes. My last dedication kind of aha moment I had was in a yoga class at the end of a class. And it was one of those classes I didn't want to go to. Not the class in itself, but it's one of those days I didn't want to go to yoga. And it was a morning class. And I really hate practicing yoga in the morning because my body isn't open. And I remember sitting or lying down in Shavasana. And it was one of those strange classes I had where it all came together. And for some reason, something happened and moved in my heart. And I felt for the first time in a long time what dedication felt like. So, and that was a moment that I had where I realized that it has to be something that is personal to yourself. What do you feel like when you dedicate? Where do and you have those moments, right? And I would have to sometimes revert back to even novels, when you read a book and people dedicate it, you're like, oh, that's one form of dedication I can remember when I was a little girl writing, like my first book in school. I'd dedicate it to my mom and my dad or to my sister or whomever. So what is your version of what dedication truly feels like? That's a great one. Yeah, and worth spending time with. I mean, I don't know about you, but when you do the 4-step practice, there are so many times because I'm trying to resolve what dedication feels like on that 4th step in bed, I pass out in that dedication phase. Does that happen to anybody? Where you're just like, I'm dedicating, I'm trying to, I think I'm feeling it, and then I don't, I lose it and I fall asleep, and ends up being where I probably need more sleep. But that's a nice one. Great. Anybody else? Any feedback?
I feel like when you're guiding the meditation, like it helps me focus. I feel like during the week when I'm trying to meditate and go through it and like sort of talk to myself
Yeah.
But like having your voice or like having someone kind of guide you through it, like is a sort of like
It helps.
object to
Yeah.
kind of like keep on course and like kind of like that meditation felt more clear for me.
Yeah.
Than the ones that I had.
Sure. And you know, I mean, I do the same thing. I have meditations where I'll practice them, and I have guided meditations where I will practice it with a guided meditation with a teacher, what the meditation I'm practicing on, and then move off of it. And I go back and forth so that it's like cleaning up my practice, just so that I have a way to be able to go back and make sure I'm not wandering. It's similar to, I don't know, for those of you who've practiced Ashtanga, but very similar to like an Ashtanga practice, where Ashtanga is you come in the morning and it's not led by a teacher, and you do your poses and you do what you can, and you're trying to do your 5 breaths, and usually your transitions are a little sloppy. And then Sundays are the guided led classes where the teacher comes in and it's like, you know, pose 1, 5 breaths, and it's very clean. So it's a nice way to clean it up. So you can also consider using a guide, having an audio on to do a meditation as well, and using it, you know, and getting a sense of it until it's become habituated. Because it should feel in a way like dancing. You know, you don't, like, you can learn moves, and then at some point you should be able to just know it, and you're not really thinking through it in that way.
Since you guys are recording and guesting, like is that accessible to like first like part of this class?
Mhm.
Kind of use it as
Yeah, you can do that. If you're really interested in getting audio, then email me and I can do a recording and have it posted. But I always ask for everyone, and anyone ever wants material, I do ask that you formally write me an email. That's the way I don't forget, and you're asking and you're meeting me halfway. Okay, great, nice. Any questions before we move on? No? Okay, cool. All right, yes, please.
I sometimes struggle with how this is one part of the second part actually doing the action, like how you mentioned last week, like spend an hour and you can do it. What about the things where you like you feel like there's nothing you can really do? Is it still like what is the effect of a meditation like this on your mind to create the causes to actually be able to help people when you feel like
You can't do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
like you're not qualified to. It's like
Uh-huh.
medical. I don't know. Like
Right.
You just don't have the knowledge. You
Right.
don't want to. So it makes sense to me when I can do both. When I'm like, okay, I'm sitting on the cushion and I'm thinking through the steps, and I'm also doing what I can in real life.
Yeah.
It feels like that's the ideal situation. But then there are things I want to also
Sure.
where it's like this feels like a bigger, harder problem.
Yeah.
It's like a higher object. It's a more intense object. And
Sure.
Like, what do I do with that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the specific of the person that you're thinking about, what activities, but we've talked about karma in the past, and we've talked about it in the framework of the mind. Does anyone remember how we spoke about karma and mind? Yeah, exactly. Perfect. So if karma is the movement of the mind, right, and you're in meditation and you're having visualizations, then it would be fair to say that you're also planting karmic seeds in that moment through the visualization. There's power in meditation and even visualization, right? So it's a different type of karma than thinking something and then also doing it. There's the action, but you plant karmic seeds by not doing things also all the time, right? Like negativity is not necessarily going out and, you know, hitting somebody, but if you're thinking, oh my God, I just wish I can smack that person, and you're really thinking about it, you've also created karmic seeds in that moment. So if negativity can have power in that way, so I would, argue that so can positive thoughts as well. And they're just as powerful. Does that help? Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing if any of you have done Tonglen meditations, it's the same thing, right? When you're taking away suffering from people, and it feels quite overwhelming. It can, especially if it's somebody that's going through something that is, um, whatever, any type of suffering that you can imagine. where it feels like how can I possibly remove that person's suffering? That is just something I can't even conceive and imagine what that's like, but you can. And it has, I mean, I know stories of teachers and actually Dharma brothers and sisters who've used it, and it's been incredibly powerful, you know. So that's how I would answer that. Yes.
What if you have like a lot of bad karma that slips and you're like, oh no, I didn't mean that. You know, like when you think something,
Sure.
and then it's like, is it out there or
Yeah.
can you retract it?
Yes, there are ways that you can clean up karma. Let me think about when we can talk about it during this course. But I know that cleaning up karma has come up a couple of times. I mean, over the last, I don't know, I've been teaching for now 2 or 3 years, 2 years, something like that. So let me think if it's appropriate in this course or if it should be waited for the karma course, which there is a whole karma course. But there are ways to clean up. Yes, sure. But the other thing I will say, just so for those of you who are still kind of new to the concepts of karma, there are different charges. You can power and charge karma. So, you know, for instance, the karma to, if I don't know, have an itch in my back and I accidentally go like this and I look and I ended up killing a mosquito and I didn't realize, that's a different karma than going out and meditating on killing somebody and buying a gun and shooting them. Right? Right. No, but I mean, seriously, right? I mean, I hope to think, you know, it's true, but there's a different karma because there's just, you know, we do kill innocent beings all the time, just walking on the street or being in a cab or anything, you know, it's just if you're not noticing. So there's different intentions. So the intensity, if that helps you any just to consider, but the intensity of how you think about the activities that you're thinking of, bad, good or bad, also have different charges. Okay, it's not the same. It can't be the same. And also another thing just to note, which we'll talk more in the karma course, but karmas are also mixed. It's not a pure, not always, but it's not necessarily a pure bag of just one. It could be split. There can be, for instance, if the example that was given by my teacher was if you are hiding away refugees in your home that are illegal, you know, and someone's coming around and asking if you're hiding refugees illegally in your home, and you know that if you gave up those names that you're basically giving up their lives, right? And you're lying. So is there a negative karma you collect for lying? Totally. Is it the same thing, but you're also collecting a positive karma for saving life? So there's a different ratio that's considered. It's not the same as lying out of ill intent. Okay. So that also helps. Okay. All right. So last week we started with class 1. We did not finish. So for those of you who are here, you're in luck because we, I think, got as far as, I don't know, maybe this slide and then the slide after. So I'm going to do a quick review and then we'll go into it. And then I'm going to, we'll take a quick break and then we'll talk just to see what these concepts, what this concept means, what it means to you. If anybody had any, I don't know, questions or conflicts or issues with these concepts, this is a great time to discuss. So last week we talked about sema. Can you say say? Ma. Sema. So sema is valid perception. Who remembers what valid perception or pramana? That's the Sanskrit, and sema is the Tibetan. Who remembers what sema or pramana or valid perception means? Anyone?
That which is perceived by unaffected perception.
Yeah. So that which is perceived by unaffected perception. And what does unaffected perception mean? No drugs. Yes, that would be one example. What is another way of considering unaffected? Mind altering, right? Anytime you've been mind altering. So it could be based on drugs. I use the example of hormones. There are all sorts, yes, angry effects, yeah.
I kind of had that's what I was writing when I was writing my class. I was thinking about hormones and then I was thinking about how all of us are kind of like walking around, you know, like blindfolded by our illusions, whether if we're PMSing or not.
Yes, This is true. However, when we talk about unaffected versus affected, there has to be some sort of baseline that you have where you know that when you are affected, it's different than when you're unaffected. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but no, because there isn't like a line for me. I know I'm affected now,
Uh-huh.
and in that period when I'm affected, there's also a lot of windows when I have clarity, and then there's also times where I'm not affected by anything, not hormones, anything, and I'm still deluded. So, you know what I mean?
Sure. But then it's also a question of where your delusion, I mean, there's a couple of things in that. When we're talking about SEMA and valid perception, what we're basically saying from the textbook definition is affective mind is a state of mind where you know, or an unaffected mind, let's do it that way. An unaffected mind is a state of mind where you know that you're the most unaffected, you're the most even keel. There has to be some sort of understanding and an agreement to what that is. If you're saying you're affected all the time, that's perhaps a different conversation we should have. But there is a sense of,
Not more than anyone
sure,
else.
yeah. I mean, we're humans too. There's human conditions, right? We have afflictions constantly. I mean, we're constantly afflicted. It's not saying that you're afflicted or not afflicted. It's not an affliction, but there is a mind altering state that you're in. You know, either you're intoxicated, whatever choice that you can have, whatever that's out there, whether it's a, and I bring up I really do bring up, when I say hormones, I also think like different aspects of it in terms of rage. Like there are times where you're so affected and so angry or just so enraged by an enormous amount of affliction. So it's a state where you're pretty much the most even keeled, unaffected in state of mind. Yes.
So that may mean somebody being on medication because like if somebody's bipolar,
Sure.
somebody's suffering from depression,
Sure.
if they're not taking those drugs, then they're off.
Sure. Yeah, to rebalance. I guess another way to think of it is kind of the most balanced state of mind that you have, the best of your ability to date. Does that work for now?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll work with that and see if that works through in the proofs that we have. Okay. So that's what SEMA is, valid perception. And what we talked about last week was that basically that every time you have a SEMA or a pramana, right? Every time you have a valid perception, that you've started to begin, or that you create the world in which you live in. Okay? Right? And we're all okay with that statement. Right? Okay. So we had this definition last week, which I'll have everyone repeat again. Can you say SEMA? Mikpa? Yupe? Seni? Again, SEMA? Mikpa? Yupe? Seni. So SEMA is Baya Pramana, Mikpa is perceived, Yupe is of existence, and Seni is definition. So this is the definition of what Pramana means. And basically the definition of what Pramana means is that which is perceived by an unaffected perception. Okay, so that's the definition of SEMA. If you don't see something with a valid perception, or I should say, your valid perception validates your existence and everything around you. Okay? Yeah? And when we talked about this last week, we said that it's quite profound that your valid perceptions creates the existence in which you live in, because why? Why is that so profound? And what about emptiness? How is it about emptiness?
That nothing comes from its own side.
Uh-huh.
And I believe that your perceptions are informed by your karma.
Hmm. Great. Nice. Great. Okay. So it basically means that if the world comes from, if your whole existence is based on your perception, and the whole world exists based on how you see the world, then the idea is that the world comes from you, not at you, right? So all the good you see in the world comes from where? What about all the bad that you see in the world? Okay, it comes from you. That was not such a strong you, but it does. All the good, you. On the bad, you. Yeah. But that means that, and what that actually means is, aside from what that sucks and that is just sounds terrible, it actually means it's fantastic, because it means that you have the power to change the world in which you live in. Yeah? Because if you can change your frame of reference, if you can change your state of mind, then what does that mean that you would also change? Your worldview, right? You change what's happening in your mind, and whatever is being projected out, you can also change your worldview. So,
What about in situations like that killing with those 17 students? Like,
how do you see that?
How do you wrap your mind around that, and it's not just your perception?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely your perception, because you're perceiving it, you're seeing it, right? And you're seeing what's happening, right? I'm going to hold that one. That's a great topic. And I'm going to hold that. I'm going to get through the class, and then let's move that towards discussion. That's a great topic. That's a very relevant one as well. And I think there's probably a few people in the room that could also speak to ways that they reconcile that. But that's a great one. Perfect. Okay, nice. So then we talked about, can you take refuge in something you've never seen? And the answer was yes. How so? Do we remember? Through logic. Yeah, nice, great. So great. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about in this course. Is there are certain things that you can see. There are direct perceptions that you can have. Physically, you can see certain things. And then there are things that you cannot directly have perceptions, I'm going to say, as of yet. Okay. There are certain things that you don't have direct perceptions of. So then can you take refuge? Can you seek refuge in something that you don't see? Is that even possible? So what we're going to do in this course is start to look at logic. How do we logically go through? And there are very specific steps in the Tibetan Buddhist logic process of how do you logically start to break down and start to consider all the different aspects that we talk about, and taking refuge in some things that you don't see. Okay. And one of the things that we're talking about in this course is the proof of future lives. Okay. All right. There are 4 principal texts that we're going to be studying in this course. One thing about these courses that are really fantastic, I will say, is that everything should be, and I will usually be really clear when it's not, if it's coming from my own personal perspective, but all the class material that you have, everything that I will teach on is based on text and scripture. So it's not coming out of some sort of esoteric, strange mishmash of information and content. It's based on scripture, which is great. And I think it's important. I will also note, while I say that, whenever you do go to a class, any class, especially spiritual classes, know who your teachers are, know where they come from, know what they're teaching about and where that material is from, and the institution of which you're going into. Because you're having people start tapping into certain aspects of your heart and your mind. And I think about that with yoga classes, dharma classes, lectures, teachers and gurus who come out of town. Know where they're coming from so that you have an idea and context. Okay. So 4 texts that we're going to be studying are principal texts that this course will be on. It's based on this kind of onion skin theory, which is a lineage of commentaries that we're going to go on. It usually goes from like the older the scripture, the older the commentary, the more difficult. And so you have these updated commentaries that have been created over really centuries to make it easier for us to digest. It's been said that as humans have evolved, we've actually become less, we're not as smart as we used to be. That's really what it is. Back then, all the scriptures were all oral transmissions and people would just memorize it. So you would hear it once, you would memorize it, and you would start practicing it. There was no audio recording or speed dial or apps to be able to help us. So we have 4 principal texts. The first one that we have is called Sema Kuntu Choklong. Again, Sema Kuntu Choklong. Sema is the correct perception. Kuntu is compendium on. And Choklong is Master Dignaga. So this is on correct perception by Master Dignaga. That's the first scripture. It was written in 440 AD. Up there? Okay, great. So Master Dignaga, he compiled the information by Atisha from the Kangyur and the Tengyur commentaries. This is a classic scripture that's used in most monasteries. And it was the first and most basic logic text that was used. We're not using this. We're using commentaries based on this. But this is something that you should know for homework, if those of you who are doing homework. Okay. The second one is called, can we say Sema? Namdrel. Again, Sema. Namdrel. Sema is correct perception again. And Namdrel is commentary on. This is the commentary on valid perception. And this was done by Master Dharmakirti in 630 AD. So Master Dharmakirti wrote a commentary on the previous commentary on correct perception by Master Dignaga. Okay, and this one is written about 630 AD.
Are these people from, like, back in the day, did they have the different schools at that point?
Mhm.
Just like this is all the logic school?
So this was actually part of the Sautantrika school. Thank you.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, but there were different schools.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually this came up because the first commentary of various, there are a lot of Hindu practitioners that had problems with the first one. So this one was actually a second one that was created 200 years later. Yeah, based out of that school. Yeah. The third one, can you say Tarlam? Selji. Tarlam? Selji. So Tarlam is freedom path and Selji is light. So this one is the light on the path to freedom by Gyaltsen Jee, who wrote a commentary on the previous commentary.
The previous one was by who?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Gyaltsen Jee we've talked about in the past. He was one of Je Tsongkhapa's main students. It's also said in this commentary that's used that usually in monasteries they debate one paragraph for about 6 hours at a time. So it's incredibly dense. Okay. Good. Can you say Sema? Gonggen. Sema? Gonggen. So you have, oh, yeah, sorry. Sema is correct perception. Gong means thought behind something, and Gan is jewel. So this is the jewel of true thought. And this commentary is the one that we'll be using. It's based off of Geshe Yeshe Wangchuk. And Geshe Yeshe Wangchuk was the teacher of our root teacher, Geshe Michael Roach, who is the founder of this institution. Okay. I believe, from what I know, this commentary is the most modern commentary that's been written. No one else has written one since Geshe Yeshe Wangchuk. When he created it, he actually had to write it twice. The first time was taught, or he wrote it, the first time I believe he wrote it in prison, and then it got burned. And the second time he wrote it again, smuggled it out of India, or I mean Tibet into India in a laundry bag and brought it to the West and taught it and gave it to our teacher, who then gave it to my teacher, who then taught it to me. And here I am teaching it to you. So that's real. Yeah.
So we're not going to study any of the previous one. We're going to just use this one and this one.
We're going to be basing it off of this one in this course, this teaching, but we're going to be using a different version of it. There's called the Dura, the collected topics. These were used in monasteries for elementary school kids, and that's what we're using. And it's not a joke, it's true. It was a kids' commentaries that were created. Geshe Michael would say that it would take him, it took him, I think, 8 years to understand this one fully. So it's like kids who are probably brainchilds. But it's not any less insignificant because it's written for a commentary for children, but this is what we'll be using, Noga.
This is part of the
Mm-hmm.
commentary.
Mm-hmm. It's part of it. It's the collected topics that are a part of that commentary that we'll be using. And we'll be studying logic through these collected topics. There'll be 2 topics that we're going to talk about. There's the sensan. Can we say sensan? Again, sensan. And this contains about 15 to 20 subjects. And it's about the quality and characteristics. Mm-mm. No. Mm-mm. But that's a good question. Like where that, if there's overlap or if they were taken out. I think that from logic, there are similarities for sure. Because it's the same thing. It's like when you think of quality and characteristics, it'd be like what defines a man versus a woman? What defines hard versus soft? Yeah. So it's basically like finding definitions and rules of how things exist conventionally. The second one, can you say Shindrup? One more time, Shindrup. And this is how, it's like the definitions of how things work. It's an outline of things or objects. Well, not how they work, it's how definitions work. It's like an outlining of existing things or objects. It's a detail of how things exist. Oh, there's 3 subjects. The third one is called Chi Jedrock. Can you say Chi Jedrock? There you go. One more time, Chi Jedrock. So this is a classification, a subclassification. Yeah, that we'll be studying. So there'd be like the difference between a car and a Toyota, right? You have the classification, and then what's the subclassification of that? Which I think we talked about this in course, a little bit in course 2. Okay. And then the second book that we'll be studying is called Takrik. Can you say Takrik? One more time, Takrik. And that's the study of formal logic and reasoning. And so in here, we'll be talking about how to make logical arguments, how logical arguments are created, what's Buddhist logic and the structure look like. Okay. So I'm just giving you a kind of an overview of the different subjects that we'll be going through in the next 10-ish weeks or so. All right? Sound good? Okay, cool. Where does logic take you? So I think what we'll do is it's 8:40. We're going to take about a 10-minute break or so. We'll talk about where logic takes you, and then we're going to open up to group discussion and address conversations like, or topics like, how do we reconcile and what does it mean when we have perceptions like the shootings that we just saw in Florida? Sound good? Okay, nice. See you back in about 10. Thank you. Okay, if you're not on my email list, make sure you're on it. Ming, that's you too. You're not on my new one. I can't. I'll only spam for so long. Okay, you okay? Oh yeah, be careful. Nice.
You can always say that.
I think so, right? I like it too. Although it, yeah, I generally do like it too. It's nice. It's what? The circle? It can be. Yeah, it can be. Perfect. Okay. You guys come in. No, you can't. I'm sorry. I wish I could let it go, but I most likely won't. You got to get in. Find a spot. They're friendly people. Okay. So I'm just going to wrap up my last couple of slides, and then we're just going to go into discussion. So where does logic take you? Gyaltsab J, when in the scriptures, he talked about how, he originally went to, he originally had issues with the idea of having refuge or going to refuge for something you can't see. And so Gyaltsab J actually ended up going to Jason Kappa historically, and to challenge him basically, and he actually ended up learning how to be a great logician, and said that one of the greatest gift that Jason Kappa ever gave him was teaching him logic. So I have this slide up here of where logic can take you, and what we're going to hope to achieve at the end of this course is for all of you at least to have the tools and the skills to be able to understand logically what emptiness means in the end. What logic takes, what they say in scriptures that logic can do is it allows you to actually have the direct perception of emptiness if you truly understand it. Okay, so that's what we'll be doing in this class. It's also said that once you really do understand logic, it penetrates everything and it gives you the confidence where you can start to understand how karma works. You don't really you don't have doubts of emptiness. You have confidence in understanding the concepts of reincarnation. It's not a what if anymore for you. It actually logically becomes sound, which is quite reassuring actually. Because for those of you who are new to the practice, there are many times, me included, where I think it's only been, I'll confess, I think it's only been recently where I have realized how much I believe in reincarnation. And I think up until now in my spiritual practice, it was a concept I knew that it was familiar to me. It's something that I understood intellectually, but I don't think I quite believed it. And something has shifted for me where with my practice that changed, and that took me, over 10 years to really get. And I think that that will even further in terms of my understanding as I progress. So for those of you who are new to this idea, logic is a great place where it becomes very much a mental exercise. It's not based on faith only. And you'll at least get a really wonderful overview of how logic makes sense, how that holds true to the foundation of Tibetan Buddhism and all the different aspects that we study. Um, and hopefully it can make you understand how you can change your worldview. Okay. And I'm going to have one quote up here that is in your assignment, I believe. It's from the Buddha. It's, I or someone like myself can judge a person, but no normal person should judge another, for he or she will fall. And I bring this up, and I'm going to end with this part of the class before we go into discussions about judgment. We were just talking about judgment. And the fascinating thing that we talked about last week, if you remember about valid perception, is that when you start to really understand valid perception, not just yours, but the fact that each person in this circle has a valid perception, it tips you over to understanding that you actually have no place of judging anybody at all, because their perception is just as valid as yours. Yours is just as valid as theirs. But if you can't read their mind, you have no idea what their perceptions are based on. You know, so the Buddha talks about it a lot of, we never know who we are. Sometimes you'll hear it in Dharma classes, like, I don't know who you are. You might be the Buddha. You might be my teacher. You know, whatever it may be. And that's true. It's that we don't know who you all are. You don't know who I am. If I can't read your mind and you can't read mine, who are we to judge each other on anything that we do, right? And if we try to, um, you know, the Buddha is saying that you will fall. You know, it's not going to work for you, right? Okay.
It's not that we try, it just happens.
It's true. That's true. Yeah. I mean, that's actually a good point. I mean, there are certain karmas that we have as humans to, I think you're right. We don't mean to judge, but we do. Um, and so then it just becomes a practice of, how do you start to watch the state of your mind and reduce judgment, or at least catch when it happens. There are a lot of times where there's judgment, but you don't even realize that you do it. I mean, I teach a workshop of women entrepreneurs, and it's fascinating because when they write copy, when they're writing descriptions of their mission and what they do in their life, it's it not always, but it tends to be incredibly judgy. Very, you know, like, my company does this because all these companies do all these, and the descriptions they use are incredibly judgmental, but they don't even realize it's become part of their vernacular, you know, where we live in this society where we almost have to validate ourselves by talking poorly of other people. It happens, and it's subtle too. It wasn't an obtuse statement, the ones that I've read. But I think there's a tendency where there are subtle judgments. So how do you watch the space of your mind and your thinking to refrain from it?
I feel like everything is sort of like, even like the positive things are judgments that come up, right? Like,
Yeah,
when we look at, it doesn't have to be like a negative judgment, like when you're assessing something. You step
sure.
back at some sort of,
Yeah,
all opinions are sort of
yeah.
judgments, right? Like,
I think that there's definitely moments where you have to make a judgment call on things, or you have to be able to decipher things, but judgment usually has a different type of juice behind it. You know, um,
So it's
more
negative.
than negative.
there's a negative behind judgment, right? There's certain type of judgments that we have, the ones that we're talking about, right? Where it's someone might do something, and there's an automatic judgment of, that's bad. You're a bad person for what you did, you know. But there might be something.
Can they, what is it if they say, oh, that's a good person because they do that? Isn't that also a judgment?
Yeah, but I don't think it's even a judgment of good or bad. You know, it's
Is it considered like taking an opinion as truth? That's like the mistake. It's like stronger than an opinion. A judgment is almost like what you think or what your assessment is truth. Yeah, it's like a concrete, definite.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I mean, we've talked about this in terms of valid perception, of how we create perceptions in life, right? And we make it concrete, and we think it's actual, it's crystallized to be a fact, right? Um, I don't think it's so much about that, because that's good. I mean, that's an issue even if it's good or bad, whether we crystallize things as being good or bad, you know. But I think judgment, when we're talking about in the sense of judgment, it's really, if you don't know the, let's put it this way, if you don't know the intention behind someone's actions, if you don't really know, it's not a place to make any type of judgment of what they're doing or not doing, you know. So let's say I walk out in the street and I see suddenly, all I see is a mom screaming at her kid, just, you know, the kid's crying, and I think, my God, that mother is a terror, abusing a child, right? But had I walked out 3 minutes ago or 5 minutes ago, I didn't see the fact that the mom had pulled the kid out of the street and was scolding the child to to protect the child, right? So in that moment, right? I mean, there are times where I have walked in a certain moment and I have no idea what's going on, and there's a judgment that I created where I was like, bad mom.
But okay, I
Mm-hmm.
similar moms and kids on the subway, like
Uh-huh.
just today. A mom very nicely spoke to the child who was like asking for the iPad or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was like, wow, she again, like I judged the mother, but like in a way of like, wow, she's such a good mother. So
That's the intent of
so
the judgment
but
that we're talking about here. I think the judgment we're talking about here is where you, whether you knowingly or just out of habit, elevate yourself and put somebody down. I mean, if you're praising somebody in your mind or verbally, I don't think that's the judgment that is applied here. And not to mention, there's a difference between judging an action that you perceive versus judging a person. Like you can judge that action of the mother yelling at the kid, and it can be like, not well, bad, good, just like
Right.
you can see it as something just harsh and painful. But when you take it to the next step and say, oh, that mother is this kind of a person because you see her yelling at the kid, those are two different things, you know. So
I want to share something similar. Like
Great.
I recently became vegan, and I had this perception before when I would eat meat that people in China were terrible because they would eat dogs. Because I had a connection to dogs, so I saw it different. And now that I'm going vegan, I'm able to look outside and like the Indian people see cows as something sacred. And yet here we go to burger places, we have steak, and there's such a, and these cows are so gentle. And you think like dogs, they're a little more aggressive, like some can be. And it, you know, looking at through their eyes and their, you know, I was making judgments based on my perception of what was okay for me. And now that I'm able to like take a step back and say, wow, okay, you know, I was making these judgments about these people, not seeing what I'm doing. And sometimes you have to clean house.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
forget of placing this judgment.
Right.
That's wrong.
Totally. And what the Buddha is saying when you see statements like this is that at the end of the day, your time is better spent not considering the judgment of he or she is good or bad, or that action was good or bad, but more so of looking at yourself and your own intention, right? Why am I seeing what I am seeing? What is the lesson that I see at this moment? Where is the opportunity for me to improve my actions and my thinking? What are the things that I need to do, and not worry so much about what other people need to do, which is harder to do than to say, but it's true. Does that help? Okay. So I thought that I would open up the last, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes of class as just discussion time. One thing that came up was how do you deal with your perception of what you see that happened in Florida, and how is that coming from me, right? How is that a valid perception, which it is. Everyone has that perception. Those of you that have been watching the news and reading it, right? You know that existed, that was a perception that you had, that's valid. So then how do you reconcile when it's not good? And if this concept of everything comes from you, how do you reconcile with that? Who wants to take a stab at that?
I just want to confuse more.
Yes, please.
Sorry,
No.
really, when I think about like things in Florida, and think about all these massive atrocities, right?
Yeah.
So when I started meditating also this week, I was thinking about the things in Florida, or it wasn't really abstract. I was thinking about mass genocide in Congo. I was thinking about starvation in Africa. It's like I see all these pictures and then it floats in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's something that I cannot do anything about.
Mm-hmm.
And it suffocates me
Mm-hmm.
because it kind of comes together with my personal kind of
Sure.
sufferings, and then it floats because of this massive just tragedies popping up everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so the point is the struggle gets bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to kind of, should I detach it?
Mm-hmm.
Should I digest it?
Mm-hmm.
Should I say it's not about me? Should I just hold it? It's just, I'm sorry, I'm just confused.
What to do when you have those moments where you see it all. Yeah. Okay. Any thoughts on that? Anyone?
I haven't thought about it enough to articulate it, but something that helps me with that, I realized it earlier when I asked about thinking about inconceivable pain. Do you understand that that too is coming from yourself? I find it harder to think about, okay, like where does that, what did I do that caused that? That can feel impossible, like what did I do to perceive impossible pain? But then what helps me is that anything that is within my reality that I can do that I perceive as help, I do it. It's like a sign. It's like these things are the things that are it's the inconceivable pain, and then anything you can do that makes it feel like it's better, whether it's calling a rep or consoling a friend or whatever that needs to, like anything can become a way of helping. And your reality gives you those signs in the same way that it gives you the signs of what you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That helps me sometimes to not feel like stuck in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's my thing. I also have something.
Mm-hmm.
Holding it is one thing. It can be really difficult. I get really emotional if I meditate on this kind of thing. Like it's really intense. It's been like that all my life. Something I learned in Buddhism is using, like, imagine how that would be if all that was solved.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow
Mm-hmm.
they're all at peace. They're all helping, not starving. It sounds maybe kind of dumb to be like, oh, yeah, I'll just sit in my comfortable cushion and imagine the world without war. But it has an effect for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've been reading this book by Pema Chodron, which is also outside there, called When Things Fall Apart.
Mm-hmm.
And last night I was reading this chapter, which was talking about bodhicitta, which means awakened heart. And what I kind of found helpful for me was kind of getting comfortable and leaning into the things that feel painful or that feel hurtful, and like even your sort of meditations and contemplations of like these atrocities and tragedies that are happening in the world. I think usually we're wired to kind of want to run away from bad feelings, whether they're pain or suffering or anger. That sometimes like you don't really know what that form is and like what it is until you start to look at it and start to break it down. And I think ultimately it's like by touching that pain, like it's supposed to awaken your heart to like feel this compassion. And I know that like we can't all fly to all these places like when these tragedies happen to directly comfort those individuals who are affected by it. But I think the lesson that you could kind of take is that like you're not powerless to affect someone's life to bring them joy or happiness.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel that sort of pain and then that pain turns into a compassion for anyone and everything, I think that's a beautiful thing. And like what Supriya was talking about too is like you can kind of manifest those
that practice and that action in many ways. Where it's like, I'm gonna try to keep this plant alive and not be a bad plant, like owner. Or you know, like the people on, like for me, what's been coming up a lot are the people on the subway that I ignore, who are asking for money or for food or for water, and I judge them, and I, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's like it doesn't matter that someone got. Like, I'm not saying that it doesn't matter. I'm just saying like you can try to categorize and find differences and like the difference of someone getting shot or someone losing their loved one, or but like in at the baseline, everyone is suffering and needing something, and you can offer them even the acknowledgement that they exist or whatever you have, you know. And I think that helps me thinking of it that way.
Nice. Yeah, it's definitely not separation for sure. But I think there's a lot of really good things that were brought up. Those are all great ways of looking at it. Anything else? Anyone else wants to add?
I think it's also good to think about why it is any of these things affect you personally. Because there are people in the world who either didn't have no perception of the shootings in Florida or people in subways, or even if they heard about it, either don't care about it or think maybe they deserved it.
Sure.
So my point being,
People become numb.
Yeah. Sure.
but I mean, like there's people in other parts of the world
that never even seen it.
Either never heard or I bet you even think probably, oh, good for them. Like honestly, there probably are some people like that.
Yeah.
And my point is that the gap, there's like the gamut of perceptions, and so we all fall somewhere in between there. And it's interesting, I think, to think about why is it that I have this specific flavor of association with what something happened and I feel a certain way. Why do I feel that way? Because another person feels this way, another person feels that way.
Yeah.
And so that gets you more into touch with what's arising for you. Because if everything really does come from you, then that pain that's arising is your specific pain.
Yeah.
It's not an inherently self-existent pain.
So how do we evaluate now that, like, what we just observed, for example? And what do we need to do to change it or not change it?
Any takers? There's a few different things that you can consider. One is Tonglen. It's a wonderful meditation. For those of you who know it, keep that in your Rolodex. It's a wonderful meditation. It's similar to what we did in class with the 4 steps, but it's different. It's similar but different. It's different in the sense that it's very much about taking away, absorbing other people's pain and suffering. The meditation we did in class was giving somebody all the things that they want. It's just the opposite of it. Same result. If you haven't done a Tonglen, there are or should be Tonglen meditations that are led in the 3 jewels in the morning. They're wonderful meditations to have. It's a wonderful visualization. It's just a great go-to to have if you haven't had it. If maybe what we can do is even consider doing it in one of the sessions in our class. Maybe next class we'll do a Tonglen so that you get the sense of what that looks like. It's a good practice to have. Another one per Hannibal's comment is a lot of work. There is. I mean, there's a lot of, for those of you who have more advanced practices, you can do an analytical meditation and understand and try to look at where does this pain come from? Because it is your suffering that you're seeing. There are certain things that you see and certain things that you experience in your life that are based on your karmas. You know, when your karmas run out of being human, you die. That's why you die, because your karma ran out, right? That's why you end up living. You live because you have the karma to sustain a life as human, but when you die, it's because your karma of being human ran out. Which makes sense, right? Because if karma's, right? That makes sense. So to be able to look at when you have certain things come up in your life, to have those be objects of meditation and to start getting a better sense of what that is and what that means for you and why you have that certain type of connection to certain types of pain that you see, for sure is worth, it's definitely an analytical meditation that you can do. But I would recommend for all of you to consider with a Tonglen if you haven't. It's a powerful meditation because it also, if everything in which that you see in the world comes from you, and it does based on this philosophy, then it it it's not overwhelming because you have the ability to completely change it, you know. And it sounds crazy, I know, because you're like, well, how is that possible, Jee? I mean, there's these atrocities happening around the world, but there is a totally different way of looking at how, and your world can shift where you no longer see that anymore. So what do you need to do to change that? How do you help take that suffering away? What are also specifically too, you can do the 4 steps that we've done in class, even based on that. You know, if you see certain things happening in your life and what are the main themes, how do you actually do small things in your life every day with the people around you, even, you know, or how do you create life if life is being taken away? How do you support that? What are the different ways in which you participate with that? You know, and as you get deeper in your practice and you decide to take vows, so we give out, you know, don't give out, but we give it out. We could. But we do vows here, where you can ask for vows, and we give vows. Where there are refuge vows that you can take, there are bodhisattva vows that you can take. So if you have a certain type of dedication and you want your practice to be deeper, when you take certain vows, are also a set of, like a bodhisattva vows in particular. There's, I don't know how many, 200 and something vows that you make sure that you keep every day, and there's a practice and way in which that you can do that. So there's different ways that you can practice that, but Tonglen is a really nice, good start, I think. Yeah, great. Anything else anyone wants to bring up? How was the idea of valid perception and the world coming from you work out for you this week? Was there any problems with that? Did you notice where you, I will say last week after we had class, Armando and I got in the car and there was really bad traffic and everyone was driving. It was really strange. They're just crazy drivers. And I find it most interesting because Armando's the most polite, like the most polite driver that I know. And he's like, what's going on with everybody? They're just crazy out here. And he was just like, and it was so funny. He goes, what do you think it is? And I looked at him and I was dying because we had just talked about how everything came from you. And I said, I don't know. What do you think it is? He's like, they're all crazy. And I said, are they? You know, what is it? How did this happen? You know, and it was just a funny moment because I had just said how, you know, we have these conversations of, yes, I get this idea of valid perception, pramana, sema, get it. World comes from me, totally into that. Class ends, you walk outside, and what happens? What the hell? You know, or something happens at work or something happens in your day where suddenly this idea of owning all the good and all the bad and the annoying and everything in between is suddenly not, you don't own it anymore. You know, were there things that happened to you this week where you'd notice, how can this be coming from me? What does that mean? Or it was just no problem? Yes.
So I spend a lot of time in front of my laptop.
Uh-huh.
That's virtual. But there's trends behind the laptop because they're sending emails from everywhere around the world. So for instance, my friend in Kuala Lumpur was arrested this week because he's an activist.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to go to jail, but I want to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so overwhelmed by the fact that I was like living with the laptop,
Mm-hmm.
and that became my
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that I'm living in New York just drop off.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know if, so I'm stuck here. That is speaking my reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was kind of a distortion in valid perception, even though it was a very strong connection that I was having
Mm-hmm.
with a friend that's miles away.
Mm-hmm.
But my physical perception was on, so
Mm-hmm.
in a way,
Mm-hmm.
because he's not there.
Right.
It's just confusing for me because I was so absorbed in a reality that's happening virtually. But then
Mm-hmm.
when you look up, you see like
Right.
cats running across the Fifth Avenue. And it's
Right.
like, okay, I'm not in Malaysia.
Yeah.
I'm in New York.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of confusing
Yeah.
in terms of this valid perception.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I mean, I think that sounds also more like it's interesting because your mind you can have valid perceptions that are direct perceptions, right? Laptop, computer, but your mind can also be other places, right? And we've talked about this in class before. Like if I said hot, sunny, beach, sand, ocean, can you be there right now? You know? And you could almost be there right now, right? You can imagine that, right? Or if you can be sitting here and having valid perceptions of us all talking and being in a room, but you could also have your mind in other parts of the world or with other people. So there is something about it sounds like
Getting lost in the book.
Mhm.
When you have a good book,
Sure.
and you're
Yeah, yeah.
like, everything around
Mhm.
you falls away.
Mhm.
You're in this book, and it's
Yeah.
just letters
Yeah.
and paper.
Yeah.
Not even on a computer where
Totally.
it's visual.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's
So-
the valid.
Totally. So, I mean, that's interesting too, because it gives you a little bit of understanding to get a sense of valid direct perception. And you can also have valid indirect perceptions as well. Yeah. Which we'll get more into, but you can, right? And which is one way where you can look at it through logic, but also when you do visualizations, I mean, that's not a direct perception that you have, but it could also feel so absolutely real. Dream states is another example as well, right?
Meditation.
Sure. Yes.
I have been like struggling a little bit with when like sometimes like what about when other people's projections, like other people's created reality affects us, but in like an external way. For example, this is dramatic, but let's say I'm walking, I'm walking on a road and someone comes out in front of me and just says like, you are a woman, you cannot pass. And like that happened and like this person is seeing something, but I need to like, but now the road is blocked. And that was like, am I making any sense?
There's someone that's come in between you and is blocking you. And so based on your gender,
Or I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to.
someone else's perception affects your ability to do certain things.
Like, I mean, I was noticing these like it's situations a lot at work, and for me it wasn't anything that actually like it wasn't directed at me, and I would say it didn't directly affect me other than like I saw the people around me were like suffering for these things, but like
Give an example.
when people aren't given a promotion because of race or gender, and it's not that like
Sure.
they're being actively discriminated against. It's just that like when right, we have this like, yeah, these perceptions, and like, let's say like the boss's perceptions and projections of an employee
Mhm.
are preventing them from seeing the qualities that would like, that they would then get
Sure.
promoted.
Mhm.
And that has a direct like
Impact on that
impact
person.
on that person.
Mhm. Mhm.
I understand that like that person could like they can regulate their reaction, and they can choose to see, like they can
Sure.
choose how they see that,
Mhm.
but it's still an external action that happened as a result of someone else's perception of them
Uh-huh.
that they cannot control.
Mhm. Mhm. So your question is,
What do we do with that? How do we reconcile that? Like, what do we do with that? And like, if I were in that situation,
Mhm.
how would I reconcile
Mhm.
that?
I want a promotion. My boss is not seeing whatever projection my boss has onto me is prohibiting me of getting my promotion, is what it feels like, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm worthy or I deserve a promotion. My boss is projecting some sort of idea onto me. It might be my race, it might be my gender, it might be my age, whatever. I don't know what it is. It might be my performance, but I feel like I deserve it. And based on this person's projection onto me, it is not allowing me to get a promotion. Yes? That's kind of right. That's the problem. That's the dilemma. How do I reconcile and deal with that? Right? When it's not, when it feels like that's not my problem, dude, that's your problem. Fix your projection so I can get my raise, is how I feel. No? Right? So, how do I deal with that? Okay. Anyone? Help someone get a promotion.
Meditation and bringing that person in and then doing actions that maybe help somebody else that's in something similar, or maybe women's group, or becoming active
Uh-huh.
so that your karma kind of
Changes or something.
changes your perception, and
Okay.
maybe that could project onto your boss or to that situation.
Any,
I mean, I just want to be like, this literally, like I'm actually not talking about myself.
Right.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
It's whoever, right?
It's
Because I think you could bring in
yeah.
when we were talking about.
Anything? Anyone else? No, please.
I think for one thing, it's like, first kind of recognize your perception that this person is deserving of a promotion and raise because you have a certain belief in that, within the situation. And then also check your perceptions of your boss. If you see your boss as being racist or ageist or genderist, sexist,
I like it. Genderist. I'm into it.
So then it's almost like you have to look into yourself and see, like, when was I ever judging someone because of their age, gender, or race?
Mhm.
That's why you're seeing it, and that's why that person is seeing it and experiencing it. So then, to what she was saying as well is like, if you want to change that kind of reality, again, it doesn't feel great that you can't directly address and like fix the situation, but I think it's about you recognizing, you know what, I've planted these seeds and these karmas are ripening. And I know that like when I first started learning about this stuff, like I was like, well, how can you prove it? I had a hard time having faith in this thought, but I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna try it. Still trying it. I can't really report to you if it's working or not, but I'm gonna believe it. And so I think like the long term is that you kind of check your perceptions, and you try to counteract that, like plant seeds that are the opposite.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think what you're at is really interesting because it's a very slippery slope where it's easy to get into. I mean, it happens all the time, but it's easy to get trapped into what immediately when the conversation goes into what is his problem, why doesn't, when it becomes what is his problem, what is her problem, what is their problem, you have a problem. You've missed the problem, right? You just missed it. I mean, and I do it too, where it's not them. It just isn't. And so the question is, why am I, like for me, every time I have a teacher that says, every time you have an affliction, the best way to get rid of it is to think about immediately, it's like, where did it come from? Where did I do it? How did I do that? And it starts to it takes the charge out of that affliction immediately. It's like, in the midst of anger, it's at someone else. It's taking a look at it and saying, well, how did I do that? How have I done that? Why am I saying that? Because the spending the time trying to reinforce why he is doing it that way and why she's not getting it, or vice versa, you've just made it nothing about you. And in fact, it's all about you. It's all about what you're seeing and why you're seeing it. It doesn't mean that you have to like it, by the way. That's like a whole separate thing. Like, it can suck. You can see actions that's like, that is a terrible, horrific action. That is there's injustice going. I mean, there's things that happen, and so you don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it by any means. But it doesn't mean that you have to think it's okay for it to happen either. It's not. That's the other thing. Like, if something happens, let's say you see your boss hitting on a colleague of yours, and you're like, well, that's not good. I'm not going to judge. I'm going to it's not you letting it go either, right? There's a lot of different things at play. You're not just going to okay and approve it. You stop when there's behavior that's not correct that you see, but at the same time, you also have to take a look, as practitioners, we all do, not just you, of why do I see that, and where are there ways I can remedy that in my life? I mean, I'm just going to leave it like that. Does that make sense? It's hard, and that's why I ask, when those of you who are really looking at valid perception and the world coming from you, if it is creating any conflicts. Because if you're thinking about it enough, it should be creating a lot of conflicts. You should have a bazillion a day where it's WTF, this does not make sense, absolutely not coming from me. That person is so self-existent. He is a confirmed total prick. 100%. Everyone thinks that way. I'm serious. And when you have those moments, you know that you've just missed the boat. But even any type of subtleties of that is actually missing the boat too. Mm-hmm.
It's like I have an easier time seeing it when it's coming from an actual somebody.
Yeah.
But often I know, because I've studied some, I know that it's my projection. So it's like me boxing with myself, sort of a thing. Where like the outside situation, I'll take this example. Gee, you're very nice and sitting here and teaching us.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say I would sit here and in my head I'm like making up this whole story about how this is unfair and I'm this and that, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that you've done nothing
Mm-hmm.
wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm having
this whole narrative, right?
This whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I was just thinking about valid perception, emptiness, and all that, and that gets a little more subtle and more tricky to work with that when there isn't actually a thing that's telling me where this thing is coming from. That makes sense. Yeah.
It sounds like to me you're talking about like trying to see the emptiness of like your feelings and your emotions and the thoughts that arise in your mind. Is that what you mean? Yeah. Like when you arise at what you have a sensation and a feeling of like anger. And you're like, wait, I feel it inside and I can see that nothing out there would have made me angry. I can understand, but I just feel angry. Where does that come from? Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Does everyone understand emptiness? Does everyone get it? No. Should we do it one more time? Okay, because we talked about it last week. So we're going to do the pen again, our favorite. Do we have your pen? Oh, yeah. We have the 3 Jewels pen that's branded. It says 3 Jewels, and then underneath it says, is this a pen? Okay, so here's the emptiness. Here's the emptiness teaching again, okay? Oh, what's that? You're such a dork. And it's rose gold. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I know. Is that a pen or did you just propose to me? Okay, so here's the idea of emptiness and worldview that we're talking about, okay? What is this? It's a pen, right? We all know it's a pen. And none of you are, I mean, can we all agree that all of you feel, at least in the moment, that your mind is not affected? You're not delusional or on drugs or intoxicated. Yeah? There's someone in the room being like, actually, no. But anyway, okay. So no one's intoxicated, right? So this is a valid perception. It is a pen. Yeah? Okay. It works and functions as a pen for you. Yeah? If your dog came into the room and looked at this, what would your dog think it was? It was something to chew on, right? Tasty and smells Hannibal's hands and just like chewing on it, right? So is this a pen or is it a chew toy? It's both. Why is it both? Because they're both valid, right? The dog's perception is valid unless your dog is on something, but if it's not, if he or she isn't, then the dog's perception is valid and the human's perception is valid, right? So this pen then becomes, it's both, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so what does that mean? It means that if the pen were self-existent, if it existed from its own side, it means that it would say pen to you every time. Anyone who looks at this would know that it was a pen. But that's not always the case because your dog came in and didn't know it was a pen. If it was self-existent as pen, your dog would know that it was a pen. So if you apply that concept to all things, right? It's actually what's considered, how we talk about it in Tibetan Buddhism is we say it's empty. It's empty of its own self. It's empty and it's empty. It's emptiness, the concept of emptiness, meaning that this object is actually empty and you are projecting your idea of what it is onto this object and you're defining it as pen based on your karma. Okay? Your karma, your past that you've created, that you have, the seeds that you've planted is forcing you to see this thing as a pen. That's based on your past history, your karma. Okay? This object in itself is not inherently, self-existently a pen. It only becomes pen because you've projected pen onto it. So it is empty of pen. Make sense? That makes sense? Okay. So then if there's G in the room, right, it's me. How many G's are in this room? Yeah, they're all valid. All of you have a completely, well, maybe not, I hope not too complete, but you might have a completely different perspective of how you perceive me. And all those perspectives are in fact valid. But they're not self-existent because then your perception of me would be exactly the same perception Ming has of me. And it's probably not the same. He thinks I'm way cooler than the way you think I am, right? So if you think about that concept as you go out into the world and you look at everything around in your life, you realize that you only perceive things and everyone else actually perceives things based on their valid perceptions and what they say is valid for them that then creates their entire life. There's multiple valid perceptions or almost kind of realities happening at the same time in this given moment. Right? So what that means then is that when you go see your boss who's sexist, right, or whatever, he may be your sexist boss, but he could be, or probably is, I don't know, someone else's most amazing romantic partner, sexy partner, whatever, you know? Does that make sense? And those are all valid perceptions that work. And so what that means for all of us is that as we go out and we experience things day to day, moment to moment, everything that we see, notepad, person, hair, skinny, fat, I mean, whatever those perceptions are, they're based on your karmas, they're based on your perception, your valid perceptions that come from you, which also means that it can change because your perceptions can change, right? How many times have you liked something and then you suddenly hate it, you know, and vice versa? And then there's karma that's woven into it all to make it even more exciting. But that's the general concept of emptiness. And so when you hear people talk about, or when I even talk about these concepts of emptiness, of things being empty or things not being self-existent, it's really coming, it's the idea and the concept that you are projecting everything that comes from you, everything. So then the conversations shift so that when you see things happening in your life that you don't really like, that don't work for you, or actually good things too, quite frankly, because we talked about this last class, you know, the questions that come up is, why me? And those are the questions that you should ask yourself. Why you? Why you? Why are you seeing it the way that you're seeing it? Could you try to make sense of it? You know, and it has to even do, yes, of all the atrocities that happen in the world, sure, you know. And then the question that for me happens is, then what am I going to do about it, right? Because there's so many ways that we can take action, and we do it in small ways and we can do it in big ways, right? We can go to the villages and go to the countries and be on the ground and help other people that are having that live in such horrible circumstances. Sure, you know, I do that once a year, but I also do this, you know. So how do and that those are choices that I made. How do you actually take action and start to move forward, you know? And going vegan is a great, I mean, just generally spiritually, it's aside from your own health, but sure, you know, if you have compassion for sentient beings, of course, why would you eat any of them? You know, dog, cow, anything. Why? Their lives. We were all once dogs or cows at one point in our life. You know, why would you do that? It makes sense. So whenever you are going through your day, I really would like for all of you to start really paying attention to getting a sense of where does this idea of valid perception and having a worldview where you're realizing the world comes from you, where does that start to mess with you? You know, or even actually, you know what, let's not always be in the negative. We can do positive. Where is it where you've noticed it's really helped you and you've noticed that it's and somehow perhaps empowered you or given you some sort of understanding of how to look at things differently? Or where has it actually been an issue for you where you just can't seem to reconcile and you're struggling with it? You know, what does that look like? One thing that I've been thinking about a lot is fear. You know, that's such a fascinating topic for me personally. And I've been thinking a lot about fear and my worldview and the things that I see and the fears I see and what do I need to change to stop seeing more fear in my life and fear in my own life. You know, those are very specific things that I can work on and change the way in which I see my world. You know, if there are certain things that I have blocking me that are coming from me, and my biggest block is fear, is that something I can overcome? So that's something that I'm working on, you know, and playing with. So please keep note of it. We'll continue this discussion. If you have not, please submit your meditation journals or email them to me if you haven't already. It's a requirement of 3 sessions a week. You can use this as being one if you're desperate, scraping at the bottom of the barrel. Then you only have 2. If you're going to Hector's class, you get another freebie, I'm sure. And we're going to wrap up class. Are there any other questions before we do our closing prayers? Good? Okay. Cookie Jinxing Nito from Ura Ling Shi Ninde Gimpadi Sange Chengdu Te Uarki Drakum Nandak Shingla Juparsho Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Miratayami Di Gewoku Sunam Yeshe Suksokshin Sunam Yeshe Manjungwe Dopakuni Drupasho. Just sitting in a meditation pose, and we're going to do a quick dedication and rejoice. So just take a few breaths, inhaling and exhaling through your nose. I want you to take a moment and rejoice for being in class tonight. Please take a moment and commend yourself for taking the effort, making the effort, and taking the time. And feel it, if you can, in your body. And thinking about the effort that it took to be in class, come to class, stay in class, participate. Take all that energy and dedicate it to one person. Who you think can benefit from something you've learned tonight. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Meditation journals.
Hector's teaching this Thursday.
And Hector's teaching this Thursday.